Hey everyone, welcome back. It's StarSound Speaks, episode 205. So in this episode, I'm going to talk about the eclipses. I'm going to do several, it's always the biggest event in astrology, solar and lunar eclipses, right? This is like the Super Bowl, right, in astrology. And I happen to be like a total eclipse nerd. It's like my favorite predictive tool, and I just nerd out on it. So thank you for indulging me twice a year. Anyway, this episode is going to be about the state of Florida, which I know I've covered earlier when Hurricane Ian hit. It's the state of Florida, and then I have three cities, Tampa, St. Pete, and Miami. Obviously, I can't do every single city. Jacksonville, I know, is up there, but these, I'll explain why in a bit. But I'm going to just look at their chart. I've looked at their charts, and I have a message. And even if you don't live in Florida, even if you live in, Wyoming, whatever, of course, we're all connected. Even if you live overseas, I know there's a lot of people here who follow this channel. I can see you in my analytics. And anyway, so, the deal is that we're all, of course, connected. I mean, I don't need to tell you that. But I think the real reason I want to share this is because, with the South Node in Scorpio, and Scorpio ruling insurance, the insurance market, the insurance industry, other people's money, finances, the resources of others. And since the South Node is about decrease and a falling away, I feel like, look, it obviously affects all of us. I also want to just give a little shout out to one of our viewers. Thank you, Kane. Kane forwarded me a really cool article that I think really speaks to everything. So here, I just want to share that with you. Let me pull that up here just a second. Hold on. Okay. Yeah, it's from The Nation, and it's called, "Is Florida Becoming a Failed State?" Now, I know this is not a jolly subject, but, we're all on this planet, and obviously we are going through very, very deep earth changes, and they're going to get very profound. Well, next year, you might even consider it like the eye of the needle. And so it's time for us to really examine, because if we don't, the universe will examine it for us, as it did, for people who are in South Florida when Ian hit. This is in no means by any way any kind of judgment or condemnation. Absolutely not. Like I've said before, we write things in our lifetime. Some things, there are some very tragic things that have happened to many of us. There are very, very difficult things that I've gone through that were just hell-raising, and for our soul's evolution. And so, it's not for us to say, but certainly with these eclipses, this is where the universe speaks to us through these, depending where these are in your chart. So if you really take the time to examine and reflect these Taurus-Scorpio eclipses, which started happening last November 19th, we had our first Taurus-Scorpio eclipse, and was a lunar eclipse in Taurus. And now we've had another one, in the spring. We had them in April and May, and now we're back again. And so we're looking here, and I want you to really, let's just really contemplate deeply. I'm bringing Florida up because here's an article that says, "Is Florida becoming a failed state?" It's like, this is not easy. It's not an easy read if you own property in Florida. I get it. I know. Large parts of Florida, according to the article, should be mangrove thickets, prickly swampland, and unforgiving marshy wilderness for our own survival. All right. And so here's this picture of this devastation on San Carlos Island. It starts out with, "Florida will try to kill you. This is the Florida rule, and it governs one of the most capricious landscapes on earth. Misunderstand the environment at your peril, as we were reminded by Hurricane Ian this past month. Parts of our unique paradise lie in ruin, and we will spend months, if not years, trying to process the experience. While Hurricane Ian has left Florida, it remains behind in the flooding and in our governor's political maneuverings. It persists in the minds of survivors, and the material effects on their lives. And it goes on and on and on. Okay, well, the idea being, yes, it persists. We've got these eclipses coming up. We've got another set of Taurus-Scorpio eclipses in the spring. Then they will cycle out and the nodes will change into Libra, Aries, Libra. So the south node will be in Libra and the north node in Aries. Right, we'll get to that next year. But the effects of these things, this is a really critical conversation to have. So what I want to do is, look at the fact that also that in the insurance market, I mean, maybe people don't know this, but in terms of the actual, property insurance and the expense of all that, there is, according to this article, I was reading about the whole thing, the property and insurance and the prices of all this, and why is it? Well, Florida leads the country. They have highest insurance premiums, and so it's kind of like that saying, what, as California goes, so goes the nation. Well, as Florida goes, as whatever devastation happens in Florida is certainly a huge ripple effect for all of us. So that's why I'm bringing it up. So this article on WLRN.org, it says, can Florida's, I'll show you the actual thing. Here it is. Can Florida's troubled property insurance market survive Hurricane Ian? Right, so this is published in the Aftermath. And you'll read, the state was already in a property insurance crisis. So you think about the South Node Scorpio, right? That's crisis. But crisis, of course, leads to opportunity, leads to transformation. But first there's this purging and there's a letting go of old stuck ways of being. So these hurricanes and the earth changes and everything that's indicated in the charts of Florida, the state of Florida, and these cities, they're all pointing to this outrageous, this need to really examine deeply. Maybe there's hanging on in subconscious patterns in the soul of these towns, right? The chart representing the soul. But anyway, I want to say that what this says is that even before Hurricane Ian, Florida homeowners were already paying property insurance premiums 3 times the national average. Right. And then in the aftermath of Ian, Hurricane Katrina was the largest property loss. It was like almost $90 billion. Well, they're projecting that Ian's property losses are going to be in excess of 60 billion. So, what we're wondering, how much, how can we sustain this? This is not sustainable to have an we're going to pick up and build the same house in the same place and then get the hurricane, hit it again. No, this is not what's happening. So, or what needs to happen. And as much as, we've done that before, right? But it's, we're in a different place now. State of Florida. Okay, let me pull that up for just a second here. Okay, so here's the state. We'll start with the state. Okay, Florida, state of Florida. I covered this in the Hurricane Ian video, which you're more than welcome to take a look at. And this particular, that was about the hurricane, specifically Hurricane Ian. But now we're talking about the eclipses, right? So it's like the eclipses at large. This is, of course, in a mundane chart. We give a 12 noon birth time. And so we have, Florida is a Pisces state, obviously. We're surrounded by water. We're, known for fraud and land underwater, right? That was always the joke when Florida had its first big housing boom in the 1920s, post-World War I. It was the whole thing about, buying land in Miami. There was it really happened. There's these investors where they were selling property to these, ignorant carpetbaggers from the north, and they said, hey, they're buying land that was literally underwater, and swamp, and of course they drained swamps and all to build these big cities, drained a lot of the Everglades, messed it up dearly. I spent about a month in the Everglades living off grid many years ago, and it was a pretty amazing, incredible experience, actually. And it made me realize, how the intrusion of our and the fragility of our natural habitat and then having to, you know, that stark contrast with going, you know, into the city of Miami, you know, going to the airport, and, you know, what a drastic world that was, the difference in that. But I bring this up because it's really prominent in these lunar eclipses and solar eclipses. So here's the solar eclipse on Tuesday, October 25th. It'll be at 6:48 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is Tallahassee, the capital of Florida. And as you can see here, as we have spoken, Venus is the exact conjunction, partile conjunction with this eclipse. Venus is in exile. Venus, what is Venus? The treasure, the personal resources, the money, the treasure, in its fall. So this is like a difficult place where Venus has to let go of the comfort zone, right? This is the Florida message at large, right? Letting go of our comfort zone. Why is it Florida? I mean, that's certainly a message, a universal message for all of us. But the reason I'm bringing this to your attention is I'm really looking very closely. What really pulls my eye in is the fact that, well, for one thing, here we have transiting Jupiter. It's in a Jupiter return, right? There's Jupiter in Aries natally, and for Ian, and then at this eclipse, it is very close, almost conjunct natal Uranus in Aries, and so there is that sense of huge, larger than life, you know, catastrophic occurrences amongst, you know, the population. In Uranus is in the sign of Aries. Well, the domicile ruler, Mars, where's Mars? Ready to go retrograde 5 days after the eclipse. In the eclipse window, it's going retrograde in the air sign of Gemini. So wind, right? Wind and harshness and storms. And let's not forget, Mars is not only going retrograde, but he's out of bound and retrograde. And I just had a feast day yesterday looking up in history, and I you know, if I can, I have to do my laundry. Okay, so, you know, I gotta stop making these videos. No, I was just kidding. I love making these videos. I hope you love them as much as I love them. But even if you don't, I don't, whatever. Thank you for allowing me my joy. But anyway, Mars in Gemini, yes, absolutely. You know, we're thinking about major wind, you know, wars of words, you know, standing up and speaking up and voicing and setting a new direction. So this is all with Mars retrograde and out of bounds, right? So it's like what will be required are out of the box solutions. Gemini is always about figuring out practical problem solving, right? So we have to take our goals and we have to problem solve outside the box, right? Out of bounds is outside the normal declination of, what is it, 26 degrees, 23 degrees, 26 minutes. So when occasionally planets will go out of those bounds, and when they do, it's often a very exaggerated effect. So there's obviously going to be a push, migration too. This is pointing to populations needing to move. Needing to move distances and perhaps long distances when you think about Jupiter being long distance travel over the sign of, you know, this catastrophic sudden change. Also, ultimately, though, liberating change and realigning our goals along new pathways, being open to new ideas, about being open to moving. So that's one thing that caught my eye. That's there for the solar eclipse. And now I also want to point out too, this one here of this, the solar eclipse is making a square, not by degree, but by sign. So both eclipses, or especially the lunar, is going to make it more of an exact alignment with this stellium. So Florida has Saturn, Uranus, Venus, and Mercury, all stellium, all in Aquarius. So it's a heavy Aquarian energy. So, you know, what of course catches my eye is that Venus and Neptune are both in the conjunct in the sign of Aquarius. And Saturn, you know, this is the Saturn return of the state of Florida. It's the 5th or 6th Saturn return since it was founded in 1845. So that is a reckoning, an accountability, a very sobering accountability check. The last time it was in a Saturn return was Hurricane Andrew, right? And did Homestead, where Hurricane Andrew battered it, looked like Berlin after the war. Did that ever get rebuilt? No, it didn't. Did we learn our lessons? Well, not really. You look at the devastation of Fort Myers with all the heaps of rubble and houses being on the beach, 6 feet from shore. It's like, okay, now here come the hurricanes. Here's that same eclipse cycle that also hit Hurricane Charlie, that, as in Florida we call them the 4 hurricanes: Charlie, Francis, Ivan, and Jean. We'll never forget those names, and it was the same eclipse cycle that it was again calling us, what is wise here? What is a wise use of our resources? But now we have Uranus in the mix, you see, with Uranus in for the solar eclipse in opposition, and also squaring. Notice it's squaring these planets. It's coming out of course, Uranus and Saturn are still in a pretty tight, within 1 degree square. So this urgency to be wise and plan ahead and think long term. And in this case, in Florida in general, it's like, hey, you've got this, look at this, Venus and Neptune conjunction. You've got this fantasy idea around real estate and beauty and glamour, but Saturn coming along as the accountability check. Uranus in Taurus is like, yeah, we got earth changes, we have urgent weather here, we have to square, take action. And so that's basically what I want to say about the state of Florida. Okay, let's go to the next one. Let me pull it up, hold on. Okay, I've got Tampa's up here. So, I also just want to say that, as Florida goes down, obviously everybody gets hurt. Everybody pays higher premiums. It's all one big, gigantic worldwide insurance pool, and so especially in the United States, everybody is going to pay, no matter where we live. It's just driving everything up. I also want to point out, before I get into the Florida chart, let me just show you another screen. Just a moment here. Okay, this picture, this is showing the, look at the shallowness of the Gulf of Mexico. Now, this is again, if you remember why Hurricane Ian, and especially when a hurricane in the time of a climate crisis with higher than average, way higher, they were like 87, almost 90-degree water temperatures. This is insane. And so the heat of the oceans, of course, is a huge factor in the speed and the destruction of, allowing way more Category 5s. If you look at the statistics, it shows you we've had many more in the last 20 years than we ever have. But again, I'm pointing out here why the shallowness of the Gulf of Mexico. Of course, shallow water, it's faster to warm and it hangs on to that warmth longer. And so when a hurricane comes into that Gulf, it takes that really, it just has, it holds that water. It's like a bowl, right? So this bowl is holding water, whereas the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, is, yes, there's some shallowness here in the central to northern Florida, but it does not hold like it does in the Gulf. So again, very exacerbated. That's why I was really guided to give you the Tampa St. Pete, talk here. So anyway, let us go to Tampa. Okay. What catches my eye here? Again, the ruler of the solar eclipse is, let me pull that up for the lunar and solar. Here we are. So the ruler of the solar eclipse for Tampa is, well, what catches my eye is that the Uranus retrograde in Taurus is coming. Here it is. It went back over the moon, and it's still 3 degrees, from this moon. It's going to hit it again next year when it goes direct. It goes back to 14 degrees of Taurus in January. It will station direct, and then it'll move forward, right? As it's moving forward, it's going to hit that point again. Meanwhile, remember, at that point, Pluto will be going into Aquarius, that huge seismic shift, which we haven't even begun talking about, but we will. And I have a really great guest for that, by the way. We're going to go do a deep dive. Anyway, huge changes, right? Uranus, getting out of that comfort zone. The moon exalted in Taurus for a city like Tampa. It's like, yeah, you get real cushy with the lux. Nothing wrong with cush. I love cush. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Velvet sofas. Just ask the cats. Well, You have to ask him in spirit now. Anyway, the drive and the tendency to just be really, I would say, with that co-presence with Neptune, to be almost delusional around comfort, and where it can really, you know, my spiritual teacher used to say, not that we're going to deny ourselves comfort, but comfort can get too comfortable, and comfort can be death. It can be death. And with the Uranus very close for that moon, with these eclipses, we're not out of the woods, Tampa, Florida, St. Pete. We're not out of the woods. This is an ongoing story. We're going to have 2 more sets of this set of punctuation marks, and next year over these places. So this is really huge. The if you remember, it was 27 degrees. That lunar eclipse last November was right on that Neptune oceans, right? And so it did look, it was kind of scary. It looked like Ian was going to go there, but it can still, and this is going to bring a lot of opportunity for, you know, sudden uncomfortable change out of these old stagnant patterns around comfort and security. So I see the moon there, and I also am noticing that the trine, right? There's an exact trine. The ruler of this solar eclipse, Mars, remember, out of bounds and in retrograde, is in natally for Tampa is in an exact 2 degrees partile trine, superior trine, right? So it's, and in this in its fall in Cancer. So that's not an easy place for Mars to be. And like, talk about fighting to save, you know, and then the shoreline, you know, and issues of water issues, very big. Here it is, and Saturn is conjunct the sun in Cancer. So it want, you know, the city wants to be, you know, have this beautiful waterfront property, and it's, you know, beautiful and prominent, but it's also a challenge. And so with that trine here, it's like really calling out. There is a lot of, you might say, you know, the ease there is like, yeah, well, it's kind of like too easy to get inundated with water. And so next year, when, you know, there's king tides coming in the spring, you know, spring and falls, when we have the king tides, and in the spring we have that solar eclipse. That solar eclipse, not to jump ahead, but that solar eclipse is going to be 29 degrees of Aries, in exact opposition with the Jupiter, the wealth planet of the city of Tampa. So you know, I'm just saying, you know, just saying, right? And here's Venus in this, you know, and again in exile. And so not an easy place, but really looking at that special, this is really called out loud to me, that Uranus on that moon. And also with Saturn conjunct the South Node, right? The loss, again, this loss of real estate, and moving away from, and being really practical, embracing practicality and visions. When you think about Aquarius, visions for the future, being wise and patient and planning with the future in mind. Does the future mean building or continuing to build on land that so easily gets inundated, especially in a climate crisis? So these are the big things coming up. Anyway, and I also think about, there's this Piney Point. I don't know if you heard about this place, that it's in Tampa and St. Pete. It's South, you know, Scorpio is also about radioactivity, toxicity, purging. So you think about radioactive waste. Well, the Piney Point plant, it's a phosphorus mining, refining plant. Let me see, I'm going to pull up the picture just a second. Okay. Here you go. Hurricane Ian, right? This was written the day of, I think, that when it hit. But again, this is a problem they've been having in the Tampa St. Pete area. There's radioactive mining pollution. So when I see radioactive, I think, Scorpio, there it is, radioactive mining, right? Under the ground. These are all Scorpio archetypes. Pollution, right? Toxicity, radioactive mining, pollution. Scorpio, 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 South Node, right? This release, this letting go, leakage, right? This, now it got away with it for Ian, but hey, it's not over yet. They've been talking for years around these impacts. And last year, was like a year and a half ago, there was a release of 215 million gallons of polluted water into Tampa Bay. There were massive fish kills. They're trying to shut down that location. It's had a lot of problems over the years. 4.5 million additional gallons of wastewater were released into Tampa Bay in August before Ian hit. So there is enormous, as they said here, the imminent and substantial endangerment to the environment and human health and safety posed by Piney Point has not been abated since a judge ordered a 6-month stay in the case. So again, you know, it's been a problem even without a hurricane. So you can imagine with these eclipses, we're really at a tipping point. And so what happens, that has naturally occurring when it makes fertilizer. And they, the byproducts of this manufacturing can contain radioactive uranium, thorium, and radium, along with toxic metals, according to this article, such as barium, cadmium, and lead, according to the environmental group Minnesota 88. So again, you know, these are very much front and center for the eclipses to be aware of. Breakdown, breakthrough. What's it going to take to give up a position that we have been stagnating on? I mean, it's look, I don't own real estate, you know, in these areas, and so but I would say perhaps if you are really feeling, and you've been feeling you need to move or want to move, now is the time. You know, and sometimes we just have to cut our losses and get out. Hopefully, if we do it soon enough, we're ahead of the curve. But you know, sometimes you just got to let go. That's, you know, and I'm hearing to say, you know, what is your life worth to you? These are life and death conversations, but we're dealing with a South Node Scorpio eclipse. This is a life and death situation, and this is where all of us can rely on. Don't forget, Scorpio is about invisibility, right? It's something we don't see. And there are the things that the help that we get, we can't always see, or we have to trust and let go and know that we are provided for, no matter what radical change is being called into our lives when these eclipses happen and at this time. Okay, I'm going to go to St. Pete. So, okay, so here's St. Pete. And this was incorporated. St. Pete is a Gemini city, right? And what do we have, right? Mars retrograde out of bounds in Gemini. Talk about making a new plan and moving, right? Gemini is about migration, right? Making travel plans and migrating. We've had obviously migration problems with, you know, Governor DeSantis shipping those South American people, the immigrants that came into this country and shipping them off, right? So there's this huge migration conversation. Well, I'm limiting this conversation to Earth changes with the eclipses. So let's look at this. Well, we have in the solar eclipse, the South Node moon, and here it is again in, you know, the stellium in Scorpio. Well, the South Node is conjunct the moon. I mean, here's the moon. The moon is in its fall in exile in Scorpio. The moon of St. Pete. So the moon represents the population. It represents, you know, our homes and such. And so the moon in its fall in Scorpio, this eclipse is pretty close to, almost conjunct that moon. So again, it's a time about leaving and a falling away, or reinvention and a reprogramming, and looking at our deep, maybe our fears and our fears and our patterns of hiding out and wanting to survive. And you know, when you think about Scorpio, the underground, like not needing to look, we have to look inward and really see, you know, the soul of that city is definitely, this is this huge transformation opportunity coming along here, especially with Venus along for the ride. So the moon is in its exile, and Venus as well, you know, so these are challenging aspects. And Mars is in, and if you look at the Lord of this eclipse, Mars, in natal Mars in Libra, right? So this Mars is in exile. So there's a lot of exile going on, right? Leaving, not being comfortable, but making these changes. I think too, transiting, I'm just noticing that this November 30th, Mars is going to pass, remember when it retrogrades backward, it's going to go back over St. Pete's Pluto in Gemini, and the Sun and Mercury communities, deep sense of cathartic experiences and, transformation that will lead to breakthroughs, but we have to look at the shadow. It's not an easy place for the collective soul of St. Pete, so to speak. And again, where this is, it'll go backwards and then almost back over all these planets, and then it will turn around and go direct on middle of January, and it'll repeat this, and it won't be done with that transit until the end of March, and it won't leave out of bounds until May. So again, creative problem solving is what is called for here, and thinking outside the box, resetting our compass for considering ideas that maybe we had never considered before. And so, yeah, the accountability check is huge for wherever, depending, no matter what, no matter where you look, whether it's the state of Florida or these cities, it's the Saturn with the Saturn return. It's that sobering reality check. It's that accountability check. The fact that Saturn wants us to be wise and plan for the future. So I think that's all I just wanted to say about that. And I hope you have found some value here. I'd love to hear what you have to say, whether or not you're a Florida resident. Certainly love to hear from Florida residents, but because we're all in this together. So anyway, my thoughts and prayers and love go with you as we all ponder and do some deep soul searching during this eclipse season regarding these things, especially earth changes. And knowing that our resources are always, even though we may not see them, we know that there's always help. The unseen world is always assisting us. And so we must never forget that. So I'm your cheerleader. I'm here for you. Let me know what you think. Leave your comments below, and we will see you next time. Thank you so very much for listening. Many blessings to you. This is Irlianna Samsara, StarSound Speaks, StarSoundastrology.com. Thank you all. Namaste.